everyone, welcome to Before the Bell. I'm Brian Willett, your host for the show, and today we are going to be doing a recap show of the January 26th Elite1 MMA Bitter Rivals card. Today I'm joined by a guest host, professional MMA fighter from Prince Edward Island. Please welcome Shawn Wallace. Shawn, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, man.
So Shawn, you are a professional mixed martial artist. When was your last fight?
It was June of 2018 in Ontario.
So you fought up in Ontario. Do you have anything lined up for this year yet?
There's some stuff working in the works for first quarter of 2019.
Awesome. So we got some things lined up. Look forward to seeing you back in action. We're going to review the show, that Elite1 Bitter Rivals card, and Shawn, obviously give us some insight as that experienced fighter, and then your expertise obviously with the sport. So let's talk about the first fight on the card, which was supposed to be Nick Coombs versus Joe Pilmer, and there was a bit of an issue there. That fight did not happen. It got scrapped the night of the fights due to not being able to find gloves that fit Nick, I believe. So what's up with that, Shawn? Is that something that happens often, or do you guys, size gloves? Is there an extra large, XXL, or how does that work?
Well, I know Elite1, they usually do it the night of the fights. They don't. They're not doing it beforehand. But I have fought for other places that it was something that was in the contract. They would request, what size are your gloves? So they have that all sorted out beforehand, so those kinds of things wouldn't happen. And but to the best of my knowledge, the biggest glove they had on hand was XL, not anything bigger, even though they do make bigger gloves out there. So that was very unfortunate. And
is that something that it is hard to find a good fitting glove? Like I can't say that I've ever tried on an MMA glove. So obviously there's some wrapping that goes on the hands. And is that something that plays into the factor, or different brands, different fits, if you will?
Well, every company is going to fit a little bit different. I've purchased my own gloves before just for training purposes, and I thought I would buy a little bit bigger so I could wrap my hands for training, and I could just get my hand in it just like that. But the thing about the gloves is that they all have to, like, the promotion provides them, but they all have to be approved by the commission. So the Elite1 was trying to do like matching gloves, and they're trying to do all that to make it look nicer, but they didn't have enough sizes, I guess.
Right, and that's unfortunate that we didn't get to see those two guys brawl inside the octagon. That was a rematch for them, and hopefully we'll see them maybe on the upcoming April card or at some point again, because that would have been a great fight to see that night.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that the second fight, or actually the first fight, if you will, of the night was Kiel and Sampson versus Robby Ennis. And Robby took that one by unanimous decision. It did go all 3 rounds. And for fight fans, maybe not the most entertaining fight, if you will, or but I'm sure there was a lot. You can tell there's a lot of technique at play here. And Robby had a game plan. You could tell he held Keelan up against the cage for quite a bit of it. So what does that look like? Fans are always, they boo or they're annoyed by the lack of entertainment, but really this is a sport, right? So how does that play out in your game plan when you watch a fight like Keelan versus Robby, and there's a lot of strategy?
I think that I don't know if Keelan knew how strong Robby was going to be, but he seemed to be a very strong individual. And when the fight started out, Keelan was moving around a lot, sticking and moving, and he was trying to stay away. And but eventually, once he started to fatigue a little bit, Robby was able to just overpower him, and then it just like Keelan didn't have an answer on how to get off of the fence. Like, he did have opportunities. He had his underhooks and stuff. He just, I don't know if the guy was just bigger and stronger than him, or if he was just wearing on him a little bit. He was softening up to the body and stuff, and that does take some out of you. And when you're the smaller guy against the fence, and even though people think they're just standing there, when the other guy's leaning on you, you're kind of carrying his weight, and it does tire you out. So that could come into play, and then it just kept repeating itself. Like, Robby didn't get any takedowns, but he just kept controlling it and just winning the fight, I guess. Winning on points, like, not the most exciting for the fans, but you got to win those fights too.
Yeah, and that's one of the big things there. You could tell Robby had a game plan. Strong athlete, obviously, like you said, held him up against the cage, and Keelan almost didn't have an answer for that. You could hear the coaches, yelling underhook, put your head under his chin, and just trying to get him off of the cage. But it seemed like every time he made a little bit of move away from it, Robby was able just to bring him back. And you talked about winning on points. So how does that typically play into a match like that? Is there points awarded for controlling another fighter and controlling the octagon?
Well, I know that there's like the unify rules and stuff like that, and the judging, like it varies from commission to commission how they're going to do it, and every judge, like some judges are more inexperienced and they don't know. Maybe they're strictly a boxing judge and they don't know anything about grappling, or they've never been kicked in the leg before. That's kind of a problem. But when it comes down to it, like damage is scored quite high, and like trying to finish the fight. But when those things don't happen, when you're having like the control and the aggression, or you're pushing forward and the other guy is just kind of defending all the time, most of the time you'll be ahead that way. But like when Robby was pursuing Keelan, when he would land like he was trying to stick and move as much as he could, like jabs and kicks to the leg and stuff like that. But eventually he would just catch him and just tie him up, and then it was beginning of the end.
Right, and it was over from there. So Robby took that one, took a unanimous decision from the judges' cards on that one. So let's move on to the third fight. Jacob Palmer versus Jesse Atkinson. And Jesse won this one via armbar in the first round. Now I have to say, watching that one, Jesse has some crazy high kicks coming out of that fight. He had some great kicks coming in, and I thought, that battle was going to be a standing battle. And when he took him down and put that armbar on, obviously the end was there. He took that via submission. But how does that, tell us what you thought of that fight?
Well, like I've seen both of them fight before, and I know Palmer started out his career super hot, and he had I remember seeing one of his fights one night. He had like an 8-second knockout, and he was like, wow, this guy's a powerhouse. And that was Atkinson's first attempt to go down to 55. I think he fought at 70 before, and I don't know where he was training before, but I know he does train with MXT now, so he just has maybe a little bit more. Everything's being put together a little bit better.
Right.
But like it came out and they were throwing, but it was like Palmer has lost by submission before, so maybe he does have a hole in his ground game. And Atkinson coming into the fight at 1-2, he doesn't want to be 1-3. He wants to win that fight. So like, yeah, the finish is great, but also like playing on your strengths versus your opponent's weaknesses. So he took him down and he did what he had to do, and he didn't just lay on him and hold him down. He went for the finish and he got that armbar, and it was a great performance.
And that was a great fight. Jesse put on quite the show as well. And like you said, we've seen Jacob fight several times for Elite1 as well, and has the skill sets. And like you said, maybe it was just the hole in the game that Jesse was able to pull out. So let's go on to the next fight, which was Ryan Goggin versus Kent Viano. Now, Kent Viano won this one rear naked choke of round 2. And, watching this fight, Kent came out like a bull. He just came out almost like a spear going after Ryan.
Yep.
What does that do to your game plan? Obviously he's giving up a lot of energy trying to go for that takedown at the very start. And what happens if that doesn't work out? Obviously it didn't work out in this. They went to round 2. What does that do to your mentality and obviously your physical ability?
Well, I think like Kent took this fight on short notice, and he was a bigger dude. And back last year when he made his amateur debut, he didn't go for the takedown right away, and he fought a striker, and he got kicked in the head in 10 seconds, and the fight was over. So taking this fight on short notice and having the advantage, like in the grappling department, he's just like, it's now or never. What does he have to lose, right? So he came in and he shot aggressively for the takedown, and he got it, and so it paid off. And he did apply a really tight armbar. It was props for Ryan for getting out of that, because it was very, very tight. And but when that doesn't pay off, like it can be kind of discouraging, because you might have only had that one burst. Like he took the fight on maybe 2 weeks' notice. Like
right.
How in shape are you when those things come up, right?
Yeah, and let's talk about Ryan getting out of those submissions, because it wasn't just one. There was a couple there where Ryan was in a bit of a predicament, and you could tell that he wasn't willing to give up. He was, pushing his way through. And I can only imagine the strain on the arm and even the neck. There was a couple of in there where it was, either a triangle. So what does that do to does that boost you as a fighter? He gets out of a couple of those submissions. Obviously, does that change the scales a little bit where Ryan starts to feel, what, I've got this. I can get out of all these submissions. And does that wear down on Kent saying, man, can I get this guy to tap?
Yeah. Well, I imagine it was a confidence boost for Ryan to get out of that first armbar, and then even at the end of the first round, I think Kent was setting up a knee bar, and when the bell went, he was trying to attack the legs, and so he's kind of saved by the bell there. But the fact of Ryan getting all those submissions is kind of a confidence boost, but it can also be things like, wow, these things are getting closer and closer. I really don't want to go to the ground. And with Kent attempting all these takedowns and Ryan defending them, it could give him a false sense of confidence of being like, oh, wow, this guy can't take me down. So then you take a little bit more chances, which is what ended up happening. Then he got taken down and finalized. So it's like, even though you're defending all those takedowns, you don't want to get careless, because if there's definitely a big disadvantage on the ground, well, you don't want that to happen. You don't want to be taken down.
Right. No, absolutely. And that was a great fight. I have to say, a lot of great fights during on the whole card. But what a way, coming out hungry. You tell Kent came out, like you say, took a short notice and got the victory. But what an all-around great fight that was for sure for both athletes. So our next fight, Cory Vern versus Justin Lee. This one did go the distance. Justin Lee took it as unanimous decision. And this was another one talking about getting out of submission holds. This was another ground game. It was going back and forth between Cory and Justin. They were both showing determination and great skills. So and they did that all 3 rounds. And how do you train for that? How is that even something? Obviously, you can spar, but do you spar to the point of saying, I'm gonna just give it my all for 3 rounds so that I know what it feels like?
Well, it was kind of odd. I might be wrong. I would have to I have to watch the fight again, but I don't think they threw any strikes on the feet. It was just shoot a double, go down to the ground, and got to give props to Vern for having the unchokeable neck. They had a super tight guillotine, a really deep triangle, and then again in the 3rd round another tight guillotine. It was very they were very tight. But to train for something like that, every academy is different. The way that they train for things, and everybody's got a different philosophy. Maybe they want to they go really hard, but that can be hard on your brain. And maybe you don't spar, maybe you don't strike as hard, but you grapple way harder because it's not damaging your brain as much, and you can really push the pace in the grappling department. These guys in these scrambles, it really seemed to pay off, because they didn't necessarily get tired. They just kept moving and moving and moving, and I was surprised that he didn't get any of those submissions. It was impressive.
Yeah. And Justin had a lot of them, and like you said, man, they were tight, and you could tell he was squeezing. How does that? I mean, at some point, are your arms just done? At some point, I mean, Justin's arms must have just been throbbing from just squeezing and trying to get Cory to tap. At what point do you say, I need to change this up and go for something else because my arms can't take it anymore?
Well, when he was going for those, a guillotine or the triangles, it's just imagine sitting in a squat for a couple minutes and then get up and then try to use your legs. The lactic acid is going to be built up, and but conditioning is definitely going to play a part, from the average person trying it to someone who's training like a professional athlete. But at a certain point in time, maybe you're like, wow, I just can't get this guy's neck. Maybe I need to take his arm. There was a point in time he had a mounted triangle and he was throwing punches. Maybe he should have took his arm and he could have tried to pull off an armbar. Maybe his neck's not chokeable, but maybe he has really sensitive elbows. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's like you said, and when we said at the beginning, when fans watch these fights, and sometimes they get disappointed in lack of action or punches. Everyone wants to see blood, right? But man, and like you said, imagine just sitting there in a squat, doing all that work, getting up and saying, you know what, you've got to keep going. So yeah, and that's for anybody watching these fights or any MMA card or a fight at any point, right? These athletes are they're training for these awkward positions and really putting the body through that and to keep going. It's not like, oh, can I get a timeout real quick? I need a water break so my legs can regenerate.
Yeah, well, it's just kind of like when we're talking about the first fight of the night, and they were up against a fence, and some people are like, "Oh, boo, this is boring and stuff," but they've never been there and experienced it. You have someone that's a trained fighter that's trying to take you down or pushing against you, and you can't breathe, like they're putting pressure against your sternum, and you're already tired, and your lungs are burning. Like you have to be in there to really be able to criticize those kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
Because it could be terrifying.
Oh, absolutely. And we can't finish off without talking about the big finish. Justin won by unanimous decision, and then, thanks his cornerman and proposes, and she said yes. That was a first for me to be there and see that live. You could see and feel the emotion from both of them. I will say, though, like, how would that weigh on you as an athlete thinking, man, I got to win this fight
Yeah, like
because I'm
good thing
going
he
to
won.
propose?
It's a very good thing that he won because like it's a lot. It would be a lot to think about. Like if you lost, would you still go through with it, or now you got to try to come up with a new plan? But it would definitely be a lot to think about during your fight as well. Like I'm sure that was in the back of his mind the whole time, and I don't know if I'd want to put that kind of pressure on myself. Really, like you've seen
Yeah.
guys do it on the big stage before. I think Benson Henderson might have proposed in the
Yeah, I think
octagon
so. Yeah.
before, but you're like, man, that's you're a little crazy. But
it's a
anyways.
it's a chance to take. I mean, congratulations to him not only on the victory, but obviously she said yes, so that's cool.
Yeah.
I'm glad that I was part of that. All right, so let's move on to that next fight. We have Scott MacKinnon versus Mike Somerville. Scott MacKinnon takes this one by unanimous decision, and you know what I like about this fight is the fight was over and they're both smiling. They're both,
Yeah.
they appreciated the work that they both put into this. They went in as athletes. They went in as, and they left there, just appreciative of the work that they both put in to that showcase.
Yeah, it was for me. It was a coming out party for McKinnon because I didn't know anything about him, and I thought he was debuting. And then when I knew he trained at Victory Jiu-Jitsu, so I figured he had good jiu-jitsu. I think he was a blue belt, but he's fighting Mike, who I know who he is. I've seen him compete before. He's a purple belt, and like just because belts really they don't really matter. But when you just look at it on paper, you're like, I really thought that Mike was going to smoke him. I couldn't believe it. Then it was just like the transitions, and like he wasn't even like trying to strike too much. Like he pulled guard and threw up the triangle. Then he took his back. He was just all over him, man. And then the second round, he came out super aggressive. He busted Mike up a bit, then took him down again, and he outworked him. It was very like it was impressive. I was very impressed. I couldn't believe it.
And it was a great, I have to say, like you said, right? It was a great fight. Their showcase of skills, back and forth, and then Scott comes out with the victory. I look forward to seeing him in the octagon again. That was impressive.
Yep.
See who he takes on next. All right, so let's go into those pro fights. We have 3 pro fights on the card. And this first one, we have Paul Melanson versus Todd Henry. Paul wins this one by ground and pound in the 3rd round. First, let's talk about age. These guys were probably they were the oldest guys on the card. Older in age. First of all, props to both of them for still stepping in the octagon and still laying it all on the line. Every punch you could tell they were putting their heart into it, and it wasn't. They weren't just going to roll over and give up. They were going to do it until the end. So the first thing is the kicks. Let's talk about the kicks, because Paul was landing a few kicks on Todd, and there was one, and from where I'm sitting, you heard it hit, and then instantly you could see Todd's side swell up. It turned red, even some black and blue areas. That has to, obviously as a fighter, you're trying to show as if you have like this suit of armor on and nothing affects you. But man, that inside, you have to wince. Like there has to be something that says, man, that hurt.
Yeah. Well, like a little backstory. Like I used to train with Paul and Todd when I first started out. I trained with them for probably 4 or 5 years, so I know them both really well. I cornered both of them on numerous occasions. So to see them fight and have the ref Barry, he used to be one of my coaches. So it was kind of like a little reunion to see it all go down in there. And but to talk about like some of those shots, like when you're taking those hard shots, adrenaline really helps, like to do that and to try to have a good poker face. Like some guys don't have a good poker face and they let everything out. But it's like if you can do that and you can maybe trick your opponent a little bit, being like, oh wow, what's it going to take to hurt this guy? Like I can't do anything, even though you're crying on the inside because it's so brutal. But it really does. Like sometimes you don't feel the stuff till after, but sometimes it's kind of hard not to. Like there's everybody's got their little kryptonite spots that are gonna you're gonna feel them for sure. Or if you take repetitive kicks to the leg, like kicks to the thigh suck, but he was kicking him to the calf as well. Oh. And if anybody that's ever like never experienced a leg kick, okay, that'll change your day. But kick to the calf, that'll change your life. Like that's horrible.
and Todd has this Boston Bruins logo tattooed on his leg. Yeah. And I have to say, it almost looked like Paul was just aiming for it the whole time.
I don't know if it was Paul's corner or if it was someone in the crowd, but they just kept yelling, "Kick the Boston logo!" Kick the, and I was just like, oh, "You better check that kick! Like, it'll shut your whole leg off, man. It's brutal. It's really bad."
I can imagine. And you know what, Todd? Man, what an athlete! He kept fighting through it. His nickname is the Ox, and I know why now. You know, just kept pushing forward, and the punches. You know, and you could hear people in the crowd, you know, talking about the punches, but like they were connecting. And I could tell you right now that it wasn't a light punch. It wasn't a tap. These were connecting and they were hitting hard.
They're big dudes, right? They have a lot of mass behind them. Like Todd was 230 pounds, Paul was 225 pounds. Like there was a fair amount that went into there. But like I remember, like Paul has taken some really tough fights as an amateur because his record wasn't that great, but he fought a lot of good guys and he took a lot of abuse. And same thing with Todd. Like I cornered Todd, and they called him the Ox. But a lot of his fights, he would end up turtling up, and he would like let them punch themselves out by punching him in the head, kind of thing. And it worked on numerous occasions where guys got tired, and then he just finished them. It was crazy to watch. I couldn't believe it, and I thought it was going to happen that night when Todd went down. I was like, oh, Paul's going to punch himself out, but it didn't happen. But anyway.
It didn't. Todd went down, you know, tried to cover up, and Paul just took advantage of that position and ended it with ground and pound.
Well, like props to Todd. Like he came off. He hasn't competed in 4 or 5 years. Yeah. And like he wasn't training like for that amount of time, so he got off the couch to train specifically for this fight. And I don't even know if he went to a gym. He was kind of training on his own with some people and stuff like that. So 5-minute rounds are considerably longer than 3-minute rounds. So when you're in there and you're into the third round and you're maybe not in the best shape and you're starting to get a little bit tired and you keep slamming like the thing about throwing big punches like that, when you miss, it's like it really takes like this little extra out of you, and I don't know why, but it's like when you're throwing everything you have and you miss, it's like discouraging, but it takes extra out of your tank.
Right.
And then you add a guy slamming in your body a whole bunch of times, like you are going to get tired, and then your lungs are burning, and it's just the third round's a bad spot to be when you feel like that.
No, absolutely. But man, what a great way to start off that series of pro fights. Those two showcasing their talent and not quitting. It went to the third round. With no quit in it and with the ground and pound, and props to Paul and Todd for both stepping into the octagon and showcasing their talent.
Yeah.
All right, let's head off to that co-main event. That co-main was Abear versus Gary Brown. Now, Abear wins this one, triangle choke in round 1. Now, leading up to this fight, I interviewed both guys on the show, and leading up to it, they were talking, you know what, we're gonna bang it out. We're gonna stand and deliver. We're gonna show each other what we've got, and may the best man win. And got a little confused because it seemed like Mark went straight for that takedown.
Yeah. Well, like you got a guy in Gary who's his record wasn't stellar, but he fought a lot of guys. Like I think I cornered him for his first pro fight. He took on a short notice and he fought Richard Arsenault on like 12 hours notice or something like that. Yeah. And so he had that one. I think he had one pro win. But he fought Matt DeRoche, who's an absolute monster, and like he's just taken all these tough fights. So for Gary to go out there, likes to stand and bang, to him it's like it's fun, right?
Right.
But on the Mark side, he just coming off a loss, and as much as everybody says, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna stand and bang and trick your opponent," he wants that win, right?
Right.
So to stand there and to take the risk of standing in front of Gary and possibly get hit with one of his heavy hands, right? Gary has lost fights due to submission before, so Mark exploited that. He did, like, he threw a few high kicks and stuff like that. He looked all right, but then he did take him down and he exploited that hole in his game, and I mean, props to him for winning that fight.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, man, it could, you get hit by one, and Gary does have some strong punches. He gets hit by one of those, takes him down. It's a chance you take. And, Mark is a young upcoming athlete, if you will. I think it's only his third pro fight, maybe. Um, what do you think? What do you see from your perspective, and what do you see would be next for Mark, or how does he improve his game, or is there weaknesses that for both guys, I guess, for Gary and Mark from what you see?
Well, like Gary's been very recreational about being a fighter. Like I think he's like just does it for fun. I don't think he's trying to make a career out of it or anything. I don't even know where he trains, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
But Mark, for example, he has taken it seriously, and he did have some holes in his jiu-jitsu game. Like he did lose a few fights by submission, like his last fight was, and he lost. I think his last amateur fight was a quick submission loss as well. But I think he's working on those, and he's addressing those holes. And his striking is good. Like I think he has a karate background, and now he's training with Spitfire, so he's doing Muay Thai as well. So I think he's going to be well-rounded. He did talk about having a tough weight cut, or like recovering from it. Maybe he cut too much weight. Maybe he should address that a little bit. But other than that, I think he's coming along great. The problem is I fight in that same weight class, and I'll tell you right now, there's not that many guys in the Maritime at 155 pounds. So believe me, I've been trying. But there is a few guys that he could fight. A few names I could think of off the top of my head. But other than that, he would have to exercise his options of maybe trying to go find another promotion and just try to stay active. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sitting on the shelf too long is kind of tough.
And that's one of the hard things, right? Especially here in the Maritimes, it's hard to find a fight because there's only so much talent here in the Maritimes. Like Elite1, great promotion, and they put on some great cards, but it's hard to find, a variety of talent unless you're fighting the same guy over and over again. And that becomes a stalemate at some point as well, like you said, and you fought up in Ontario. So yeah, and you start kind of spreading your wings a little bit and going to other places to see what it looks like.
Yeah, well, you need these like regional, local shows. Like you got to get your experience as an amateur, and then you transition to become a professional, and then you're starting to get your feet wet and stuff. Because a lot of these other promotions that are not in Atlantic Canada, for them to bring you out, it's an expense, right? So they definitely. They don't bring you out to they don't want you to win. They want you to fight the hometown guy and lose. Like it's no secret for there. Yeah. But you need to be a little bit reputable as well. Coming from the East Coast, like it's nice to have a couple wins, so then they can sell it a little bit more, and you're not just fighting. You're not just having like a curtain jerker fight. Like you're going to fight maybe someone that has a little bit more experience, and it's good for you because they like to have big shows, and it propels your name out there. So
absolutely. All right, let's move on to that main event, the last fight on the card, which was for that welterweight, the vacant welterweight title, which was between Christian Savoy and Alderic Keith. Going into this fight, like called Bitter Rivals, and I'm going to say probably called because of this main event. The two guys obviously showed no love for each other. A lot of memes going around, social media posts. And I'd say even when the fight ended, there was still no love. So Christian wins this one by TKO, referee stoppage, second round due to medical advice. And, everyone seemed to boo or, no, sorry. They didn't boo when they announced that, but they booed because of the stop, right? Because nobody likes to see a stop because of a cut. But man, I have to say, Aldric's gash, I won't call it a cut, I'll call it a gash, above his eye was the worst I had ever seen. In the years that I have done this, and interviewing him afterwards, I have to say I couldn't look at him because it was, I mean, the blood doesn't bother me, but I'm pretty sure I could see either his muscle or his skull, one of the two things, from deep down. So what is that like? I mean, you're fighting, you're training for this, you got some bad blood, you want to just destroy each other, and the fight gets stopped because you're cut. Like, what does that do to you? How does that?
Well, I've reached out and talked to both guys. I know both of the guys. Like, I won't say I'm best friends with either of them, but I know them both. And like I was talking to Aldrick, and that, like, from where I was sitting, I couldn't tell how bad the cut was until I seen it afterwards. And you're like, oh wow, that is horrible. And he told me he got like 14 stitches in his eye, and you're like, wow, that's a lot of stitches for such a small spot. So it's pretty serious. And when I was talking to Christian, like, he was kind of like, he was happy that he won. Like, he definitely won that fight, but like it did suck the way that it ended. Like with that cut, and like I'm sure Aldrick's not happy with it. He wanted to continue, but
Yeah.
you really at that point in time, like that was a big cut, man. Like
Yeah, and at
that
some
was
point,
horrible.
fighter safety comes into play, right? And no one, I will say, no one wants to see the doctor step in because then you're like, oh no, right?
Yeah.
Is it going to stop? And at some point, fighter safety comes into play, and I have to say, like, I mean, he couldn't see his cut, and obviously, you know, the goal is you just keep going. Title's on the line. This is the moment to showcase your talent. But at some point, do you just say, yeah, you know what? Like, I appreciate you stopping that. Like, I could have gotten a lot worse, right?
Well, I think he's like after seeing the cut, like at the time he wouldn't want to. He would be upset, obviously, in heat of the moment. But then after he would have seen it, he would understand. Like there needs to be a certain amount of like, okay, you need to stop this, right? Like it was in a bad spot too because it's when you're on your back, it's going to bleed right into your eye and pool there, so you're not going to be able to see. So that it was definitely the right decision to stop the fight at that point in time. Like I said, I thought it was unfortunate that it stopped to a cut. Like I always thought it would be greater to, you know what I mean, to get the finish, like either rip them from consciousness or make them quit or destroy them for 5 rounds, like just something like that. But
you're almost not satisfied, right? Even you still win, you get the title, you know, you move on, but it's almost like you're not satisfied with how it ends. It's almost like a bitter taste in your mouth because you're like, wait, it's over, and that's how it's gonna end.
Well, that's how I thought, and then I like I said, I reached out to both guys, and like I thought, I was like, oh, they should probably rematch, is what I thought. Maybe they have different thoughts on it, but like when I brought it up to Christian wasn't. He was not happy that I was bringing that up. He's like, I clearly won, and thought I was disrespecting him and stuff. And that's not what I was trying to do. I was just speaking my mind, trying to have a proper conversation with him.
Right.
So I was like, all right, I'll leave you alone. I'll stop talking to you about it. But like I was also talking to Aldrick, and he's just like, yeah, well, it is what it is. I'm sure he would accept a rematch because it's like it does, like Bitter Rivals. It seems like there was so much bad blood, and then there was a lot of blood spilled as well. But like the next round would have started back up on the feet, and we had those kind of weird stand-ups in the fight. And when they did stand up, Aldrick came out guns blazing, and then he dropped Christian, right? As much as maybe they shouldn't have been stood back up, it did happen. So the second round, you never know. He could have came out. He could have did the same thing. We have no idea, right?
Yeah, and let's talk about that stand up. Like they were on the ground. Referee calls, you know, a stop just to get the gut check. What's proper protocol? I mean, I think it's to put them back in the position that they were in, right?
Yeah.
Like, so what is that? What is that? I guess that happens. You know, Christian obviously is. I mean, I would be confused, obviously, just like you're like wondering what's going on, and then he gets rocked.
Yeah.
You know, and you're right. You know, if it goes to round 2 and Aldrick keeps swinging, you know, maybe he goes down. Maybe he goes down for good. You never know. I mean, he got rocked. Christian got rocked against Nick Nacarado that one time. He, you know, obviously got rocked against Aldrick. Whether it's because he's confused or not, you know, obviously there's something there. So don't know where I'm going with this, but interesting kind of turn of events though, right? Where they're on the ground. Christian's got top dominant position. He's got the elbows going to the face. Stop. Hey guys, let's stand up. What does that do to you?
Well, it would. Christian, he was obviously quite upset when it got stood up, and but there's a lot of stuff going on, and like I'm Barry the ref. He's like, I consider one of my good friends, and we spoke about it afterwards, and like ultimately he has the decision. It's up to him to do what he wants. Like a ref can, if he could bin mount on him, he could stand him up. He would get a lot of heat for that, but it ultimately is up to the ref. So he sees this big cut, he calls in the doctor. Heat of the moment. The best refs out there make decisions. Like you watch the UFC and you see John McCarthy's made mistakes, Herb Dean's made mistakes. Some of the other ones that get shredded all the time, right? It's a very tough job. It's either you're stopping the fight too early, you're stopping it too late. Everybody's going to be a critic, right? Yeah. But I guess what I'm really trying to say is like ultimately he made that decision and he has to stand by it. And maybe it wasn't necessarily right, but he made it right the second time, right? They went back to the ground to call the doctor back in because the cut was getting worse, and he put them back down on the ground. So It
So that's an interesting, and I will say that's a bit interesting too, because he did call a stop again the second time. They're almost the exact same position and almost the same place in the cage. Christian is going elbows again and calls it a stop to the play. Doctor comes in, checks it out. Yeah, you're good to go. And there mustn't have been much time left on the clock, if I remember. And then they stop it mid, in between the two rounds. So I guess not that you have the answer, but how does that affect you too? Like they didn't stop it during the fight, but then all of a sudden, 30 seconds later, they're like, yeah, it's too far now.
Well, it's like I can imagine for Aldrick, he doesn't know how bad the cut is, and he's like, "Wow, there's so much attention being brought to this cut. Like, how bad is it really? Like, that could be that could play on your mind a little bit, right? But it's like my recommendation was, and I'm not a ref, but when it comes to those kinds of situations, maybe wait for a lull in the action. Like, it's almost like treat it like if someone's mouth guard came out. You're not going to stop it immediately and say, hey, put your mouth guard back in. Like you spit that out. You have to wait for something to stop, right? So maybe wait for them, maybe Aldrick to break down Christian's posture and be like, okay, whoa, stop. Now the doctor comes in, and then at that point in time, you can decide how long were they being idle on the ground? Were they just trying to rest? Or were they, one guy was trying to hold them down, the other guy was trying to get out? Like it,
Right.
Ultimately, every situation is going to be different. You can't say one size fits all. It's not true,
Yeah.
right?
And for the referees too, right? You're in the heat of the moment. And I would say, their adrenaline is running, probably not as much as the fighters, but man, like you're still in it and you're in the main event. You're watching these two guys really bash it out. Like at some point, like you yourself are trying to make these decisions on the fly and say, okay, what's best for the fighter, and not necessarily throw out the rule book, but it's, rule book will come next, but let me figure out how I can, make sure this fighter's okay.
Yeah. Well, like the refs are there to protect the fighters, and they have the ultimate power once they're in there. Like I'm pretty sure that the referee has control over everything. Over like the commission is like, you are to take care of these people, and what you say goes. Because you've seen instances before where the ref can say nobody's coming in the cage. Like this is my area. I'm in control, right? And that's the way it is. So when it comes down to a situation like that, he maybe had a lapse in judgment for a second. He's like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. But they have to respect what he did because it's his decision. And like I said, then the next time he did put them back down. So maybe he realized that he kind of made a mistake, or because probably the biggest thing is that referees can't be influenced by the crowd and by the corners and stuff. If a corner's yelling something, well, maybe he can look for it, but he can't listen to a corner man. He can't be if the crowd's booing, well, too bad. It has nothing to do with them. It's about the competition. It's not how interesting it is for the fans. So it's a ref's decision, 100%.
Yeah, and you said it right there on the point, I think, is when you say, it is a competition. People always say, oh, the fight. It's not just two guys who were having a drink at the bar and said, hey, let's step in the cage and just fight it out. It really is a competition, and you're all athletes. You guys are training for this, and really it's a showcase of skills. And the guy who wins has the best skill, and has the best, game plan, if you will, that walks out of there. And the referee is there just like a basketball referee or a hockey referee. They're there to make sure that this is happening to the rules and it, stays safe for everybody. So yeah, props to Barry for, keeping his head cool and continuing on. And the second time he did it, he got it right, or, and just keep going and not worrying about what the fans are saying and things like that.
No, there's no point of arguing with the fighters and stuff. Like Christian was quite upset, and he's like, you need to be professional. Don't you're in the middle of a fight. Be like, okay, you can be upset, but also he seems like he got caught up with that. And I'm not saying that's the only reason that he got caught with that punch, but it's like he definitely was thinking about it and he was emotional about it. And then Aldrick stepped in. It's like I think Aldrick switched southpaw and threw a straight left and just connected clean on the chin and knocked him down. Right? It's like he recovered very quick. Like you could tell Christian was in great shape. That helps with your recovery. But it's like he didn't necessarily need to take that punch. But it is what it is. There's no woulda, shoulda, coulda, whatever. It's over with, right? It's
Absolutely.
just like you won. There you go. Be happy with it.
So what do we, Christian wins that fight. Now he's calling himself, the champ. He is the middleweight champ for Elite 1, welterweight champ for Elite 1. What's next for both guys, you think? Everyone's talking UFC for Christian. Is he ready for the UFC? Are they ready for him? And same thing for Aldrick, right? What's next for Aldrick? Does he stay on the local show for a bit and then and work it? I personally, I think both guys make it to the UFC eventually. They both have great, athletic talent, or somewhere, whether it's that UFC, Bellator, I don't know, but
yeah. Well, like starting off with Christian, if he's not making it, like there was all this talk about he had, like I know his management team has a lot of fighters in the UFC, and then he had all these conversations about maybe having a fight and stuff like that. Now that he won, like that was like most of their drama between the both of them was talking about the records and who they fought, right? So like not picking sides or anything like that, but that was Christian's first like big legitimate win, right? He beat this guy that had a respectable record, comes to fight all the time, made weight. Like, okay, boom. If he doesn't get that call now to a big show, I suspect that he should have a, like, if he's gonna say he fights for Elite1 again, I think they should bring in like a UFC veteran or something like that for him to fight that the next step up. Or like I was saying earlier, maybe they rematch and they can like bury the hatchet for good. Yep. Maybe that would be more definitive, and maybe they would shake hands after that one. I don't know, but for Christian, I think the bigger fights are on the horizon for him, and he has to rise to the occasion. And if it's not on the East Coast, it's either maybe the UFC, or maybe he could go to TKO. They're pretty big.
Right.
Western Canada, like promotions like Unified, they're bringing in like. They're always bringing in UFC vets and big name, like they're always doing big fights. So it's like a lot of those guys could use that platform to propel themselves there.
Right.
And then a guy like Aldrick, it's a tough loss for him to swallow. That's so he's 9-5 now. It's definitely, if you still have that dream of making it to the big show, well, it's going to be a longer road for sure. But the thing to do is just to keep training. And keep fighting, and like I'm sure he can fight on the East Coast, or he could go to TKO, you know what I mean? Or like I fought for BTC this summer. They're always looking for guys. He could go fight for them. Like
right.
It's not a career ender for him. Like he's not old, like super old or anything like that. Like he still definitely has some more fights left in him.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Like you said, if Christian doesn't get the call to move up to the big show, maybe he takes on another fight here. Maybe we see Adam Hunter step back in the octagon if he's cleared to fight, or maybe Matt McGrath makes a comeback out of retirement to take on that fight, or you never know. Like you said, right? You put on that name so that maybe that's what propels him to that next level.
Yeah.
So that's it for that card, Shawn. I appreciate you coming onto the show and being our experienced fighter and giving us some of the inside scoop for each of the fights. It was a great night of fights, that Elite1 Bitter Rivals card. Everyone showcased their talent, and they've announced a show in April. Can't wait to see that card and that lineup. Obviously, they put on some great shows, so looking forward to seeing who's on that card, and hopefully you are.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, so we thank everyone for watching the show today, watching our recap video for this Elite1 MMA Bitter Rivals card that was happening on January 26th at the casino here in Moncton, New Brunswick. We look forward to seeing everyone on their next show, and stay tuned for more interviews from Before the Bell.